We here at Artsy Window had the pleasure of visiting a dope space called Flower Shop Collective. Flower Shop Collective is an art and fabrication studio that cultivates the ideas of emerging artists working towards more equitable futures. Their goal is to help artists of all skill levels execute their ideas, learn new techniques, and have a safe space to do so, with a prioritization on immigrant artists, artists of color, and women identifying artists. También les ofrecen todos estos servicios en español. For more information, head to flowershopcollective.com or Flower Shop Collective on Instagram. Go check them out. Welcome to AW Classroom, where we interview movers and shakers and artists. And today we have a curator of color. Today we are sitting with the wonderful Claire Kim, who I'm so excited about because she's been doing so many amazing things. And also me and Claire go way back.
That's right.
To 2016 arts intern program.
Oh,
that was 2016, right?
Babies.
Yeah. So, and we've just been growing together as curators and editing each other's stuff and in conversation for years. And I'm just so excited to hear about Claire's current projects, where she's going, where she's been. So let's jump into this. So Claire, can you introduce yourself and how would you describe yourself just as a person?
Yeah, let's jump into it. So my name is Claire Kim. I'm an arts administrator and curator. I've been bouncing around over the last year because of COVID and the quarantine, but mostly been based in New York City over the last 8-ish years. And yeah, like Kiara said, we met in 2016 through a wonderful program through Studio School that paid us to be interns at arts organizations. I was at the New Museum. Kiara was at Brooklyn Museum. Yeah. And yeah, I mean, describing myself, I work with contemporary artists, living artists. I do studio visits and work on exhibitions, some independently, some through organizations and fellowships. And yeah, I'm just a lover of art, a lover of artists. And I am currently getting prepared to start grad school in the fall at Bard for their Curatorial Studies program at CCS.
Yes, I want to get more into that. But today, right now, I want to go into a time machine. Tell me a bit about how you grew up. What was it? What was your upbringing like? Give us details, give us imagery.
Yes, let's. I mean, it's crazy to think about just because I'm home right now and I'm not often home. I'm currently in San Diego, California, in my parents' home. And I was born and raised here. And, you know, I don't think that I was really introduced to the arts, or specifically contemporary art. I think was especially kind of far off from my day-to-day. I, in high school, was on the high school magazine. Shout out to Scribe. And I worked on the arts and culture section in that class. I think my first introduction into, specifically art history was taking an art history course. I did AP art history senior year of high school just for funsies. I was also a big fan of the teacher who taught that course. So I took that class. I was like, oh, cool, interesting, but maybe not for me. And then just continued on thinking I would do journalism, magazine work. I was always really into writing and reading, really furthered myself from the maths and sciences. So, I mean, childhood, my parents immigrated from South Korea, from Seoul in 92. And so they came to San Diego with very little and kind of just were here for a bit to learn English. And then we're planning on moving back. And they ended up staying here. And my mom is a business owner. She's had like different types of stores throughout. She currently owns a small stationery store in Zion Market, which is a large Korean supermarket in San Diego. They sell like pens and pencils and things, and they also sell a bunch of K-pop related items now, which is great.
I love that. Now I want to go to her store.
It's so cute. And my dad is a martial arts instructor. So my dad has a Taekwondo studio in San Diego, and his same studio has been in the same location for almost 30 years now. So that's like a community that has been building and continues to be a part of my life. You know, even now when I talk to my parents, I'm like, it's quite bizarre to me. We've talked about this a million times where we're like, yeah, we're out here doing this art thing, and it's really fucking hard to explain that to our parents and our family members. But I think that I've been really lucky in that, although perhaps that kind of language in terms of what it is that I'm actually doing can be difficult to understand, the encouragement and support has always been there from my parents. They're kind of like, whatever you want to do, we support it. We're proud of you. And I feel like for the most recent show that opened at James Cohan Gallery, I was able to have my parents come out to New York for the opening. And that was their first ever art opening. And it was just really cute and lovely to have them both there and celebrating and give them a little peek into what my life is like in terms of my professional life.
It's like a special moment. I feel like I love to hear about those moments, especially from like artists and curators and people that work in the art world, when they actually bring their parents to see like what they're doing. And then you kind of see your parents go through like that aha moment of like, oh, so this is what you do. Because explaining it on the phone or even in person, like,
it sounds insane.
They're just like, what is this? How are you making a living?
Right. Yeah, it was very much like, oh, okay, gotcha. Like, there are people here, there is money here, there is like, you know, there are things happening, but it's hard to understand. And I think that I, you know, get that to a certain degree because I really hadn't been to museums or galleries growing up. And I really started going and seeing art after I graduated high school and moved to New York. And that's when I kind of fell head over heels. But I have that memory of that feeling like the art world and art generally feeling really distant and feeling like a place where, you know, maybe I don't necessarily belong or is not necessarily for me.
In terms of like your interest in art, what was that moment where you realized like curating is actually a job? Yeah. And you were just like, okay, I can see myself doing this?
Yeah. So my first ever kind of job or internship or whatever in the arts was with you for a studio in a school. And I was at the new museum, and that kind of opened me up to, oh, this is a career path. Of course, back then I was really more interested in public programming and museum education specifically. So I really wanted to work in the education departments of a museum or an arts nonprofit. And so I was doing that, working here and there. I did the new museum. I was at the Guggenheim for a little bit and the Asian American Arts Alliance doing different programming and education roles. And I think that I learned so much during those couple of years finishing up college and also working in these organizations. And I think that I became really frustrated with this distance that I was seeing or lack of communication that I was seeing in a lot of these places between the curatorial departments and the education departments. You know, oftentimes their entire departments would be physically far away from each other, right? On like different floors or across, different boroughs even. For me, it seemed like the education departments in these organizations are doing a lot of the groundwork in terms of the DEIA efforts, right? So they're getting young folks into the museum so they have an understanding of or a relationship to art starting young, so then they'll return as adults or continue to come back. And which is super important because a lot of these organizations, it's like, their front-facing language is like, we care about diversity and equity in the arts. Like, this is our main thing. Like, and it's so related to funding. It's so related to optics. And yet, for these same organizations to have such distance between curation and education just really didn't feel like it made sense, you know? And it felt like there was a power dynamic between the two spaces or two departments. And so around the same time as me having these conversations with my peers, probably with you and other folks, I was also becoming really interested in just doing studio visits with artists and making more close relationships with working artists, just because I found it really fascinating, And so with all these things kind of happening at the same time, I decided, why not try a curatorial role? Why not try and enter the art space into from a place of more power, at least from my eyes at the time. And that was when I was accepted into the Downtown Brooklyn Arts Management Fellowship that was hosted by BRIC, which is a nonprofit that I currently work at. And I decided to work specifically in curatorial roles during that time there. And it just clicked, that was exactly when it happened. 2017, I was doing this program. I assisted in curating 2 different shows, the open call for BRIC, their biannual open call, as well as a photography exhibition at MoCADA, the Museum of Contemporary African Diaspora and Arts. There's, you get it. There's this fervor, this buzz that happens when you're working so closely with artists and then also writing and then also having a million conversations on the admin side, on the creative side. You're getting the vinyl, you're putting the artwork up, you're contacting art handlers, you're making sure you're as a curator, we kind of zoom out and we connect all of these dots and make sure that everyone's good, and we wrangle everyone,
It's the octopus arms.
Exactly, the octopus arms. And there was something really satisfying. My double Virgo energy was so into it. It's stressful and it's very difficult at times because you're managing a lot of different personalities, constantly on email. But there were so many parts of the entire process that just felt so fun to me, right? So it's having these conversations with artists, listening in on why they make the work that they do, how they came to creating the pieces that they do. Getting invited into studio visits is just it still blows my mind every time that it's such a privilege, to go into these very private spaces where artists are creating sometimes works that haven't been seen by other people publicly for years. And to get a sneak peek into that and be able to speak to artists about their practice, how it's changed, how it will continue to change, what they're interested in now. At the end of the day, it's just fun. I like spending my time doing that. I like spending my time with artists and arts-centered folks. So I was this is it. This is what I want to do. I want to be around artists all the time. I want to show artwork by artists who just aren't getting the opportunities that I think they deserve in this city. It's so competitive in New York. It's expensive. I feel every other open call, there's a fee, which is insane. There's just so many barriers to artists showing their work, even, right? Not just finding whatever commercial success or whatever it is that could also be important. But I think that for me, it was people should be seeing this work. And I can help make that happen.
I'm also interested in the residency that program that you help like set up, Streamline Residency. Can you tell us a bit about that and like what's happening with it?
Yeah, for sure. So earlier this year, I think in like March, a couple friends of mine from Ado Studios reached out to me saying that there was an empty studio space that they have that they'd love to donate to me to do maybe an exhibition or something. And at the time I was like, I am working 2 jobs. I'm tired. We're in a whole ass pandemic. I'm not doing that. But of course, because, you know, we are who we are, I was like, but let me just run it by a friend, like a collaborator really quickly. So I reached out to my friend, Danilo Machado, who I've worked with previously on public programs, different applications. You know, we've worked together in a curatorial role before in writing collaboratively, et cetera. And we talked through it. And Danilo was like, okay, well, maybe it's not an exhibition. Maybe we can offer this space to someone who really needs it. And so we came up with an open call process for performing artists throughout New York City. We offered a stipend and a final culminating kind of event performance piece. It was kind of a dream, you know, it was way more work than I had anticipated, obviously, but Danilo and I had been having a lot of conversations around the ways in which performing arts had changed so drastically over quarantine, with everyone kind of being moved into their homes and performing artists not being able to perform in front of other people, which is so, or in person, which is so specifically, you know, key to their work. And so thinking about the different performing artists and performances that we'd seen that had really, in my mind, like changed the game in terms of virtual performances, I was like, how can we push that further and support artists who are thinking really creatively, really outside of the box for continuing their practices online. It was so wonderful to work with Xiomara throughout the entire process. She was absolutely incredible artist, but also just generally a lovely human being. I think that's kind of exactly what Danilo and I needed, you know, to stretch our brains and our capacity in terms of supporting other artists. I don't know what's going to happen next, because the residency opportunity came because of the space donation. And I think Danilo and I would be obviously very happy to do something like that again, but who knows, you know? And I think if what we learned through this process was that there are so many talented people who just need space and time to be able to make their work. And it felt so good to be able to offer that to an artist, but it also at the same time was like, it was just a big wake up call in terms of, oh, okay, this is a need that I'm seeing in my community, in our community, and an opportunity now to think about what we can do to meet those needs in terms of thinking about different grants and foundations and spaces and what we do with these donations, et cetera.
Yeah, I love how the story that you just told and how like the residency came to be was like literally like you responding to a need. And I love how it kind of like expands on the definition of like what a curator is, because people think,
Right.
oh, a curator is just someone who chooses artists, we set up the exhibition. It's kind of like a very like glitz and glamour type of facade that people have when they think of curators, but it's just like, but curators a lot of the times, you know, we're the ones who utilize space, can give that space to artists to use as a studio. It's really about like spreading the resources in different ways.
Yeah.
Even you talking about grants and space and all these things just really expands on like what a curator is, because it's really more about supporting artists. Like that's what I'm hearing.
Exactly.
Like everything that you're saying, you're just like, there's so much talent. We need this.
Yeah.
How can we like give more access to this? And it's crazy to think
Totally.
about, especially in New York, right now there's so many vacant spaces.
Right.
What has been on my mind for like the past months of like there's so
Yeah,
many empty space. Like, how can we band together and like go up to these landlords and be like,
I know.
yo, we know how to utilize the space, and really have it serve people that need it the most.
I know. I mean,
Mhm.
we got to get you a space. Artsy Window needs a
A
storefront.
fact. That's a fact.
Or make it happen.
Exactly. So I do want to talk about your show that opened on June 12th, Uncommon Proximity. Can you tell me a bit about the title and also just like how the show came to be? It's in a wonderful space here downtown, James Cohan. Such a beautiful project. Tell us about it.
Thank you. Um, yeah, the exhibition went up. Oh my God, it's already been a little over a week. Yeah, so it opened on the 15th, on Saturday the 15th. And it was our culminating project for the NXTHVN Fellowship. NXTHVN is an arts organization, nonprofit based in New Haven, Connecticut, founded by artists Titus Kaphar and Jason Price. And they house fellowships for studio artists as well as curatorial fellows. And so my time at NXTHVN was technically supposed to be a year long. I started in January 2020. Was supposed to end last December, but because of COVID and all the delays and changes, yada, yada, uncertainty, they extended the program for, I think, 5 or 6 months more than we had originally planned. And for the artists, they obviously get studio space, they're making the whole time. For the curators, we are offered 2 exhibitions. So the first exhibition is kind of a DIY, whatever artists you want to work with, whatever project you want to do. And then the second exhibition is the artist in residence exhibition, where you curate the works that the artists had been making over the course of the fellowship term. So the exhibition Uncommon Proximity, which is at James Cohan Gallery, is the artist in residence exhibition. So I curated the works of our lovely 7 artists, my fellow fellows. We often think about themes for exhibitions in while speaking to artists, or we like already come with a theme and then we start collecting different works from different artists. It kind of like that, depending on the project, right? But for this show, we were going with a non-thematic exhibition because, you know, it would have been impossible to be like fitting in works or practices into a theme after they've already been creating, right? So it was a non-thematic show. And yet, when I was doing my studio visits throughout the year, but especially closer to the opening, it became super clear to me that although it's a non-thematic show, there were so many through lines that were just happening serendipitously throughout everyone's practices, you know? And I think that it's a lot of different things. The fact that we were working and living together in such close proximity to one another throughout the year and a half. And then also the fact that we were doing all of that work during a really terrifying time in the world. At some point, I think that the fellows became our own little quarantine pod because we couldn't really see other people. And, you know, it's important to note that most of us, the grand majority of us, weren't from New Haven. We all came from different parts of the US and landed in New Haven. And so we didn't have community there. We had us. And so we became really, really close and bonded, I think, in a way that perhaps other cohorts, not just NXTHVN, but just generally for fellowships and things, hadn't or don't in the, or don't, you know? So I saw a lot of work that was speaking to elements of healing, of protection, of retribution, of returning to power, that was just super ingrained in every single artist's practice, which made my work so much easier. So I wasn't forcing different ideas to be melded together to create an exhibition. And so I feel so incredibly lucky and so privileged to have worked with the 7 artists in the fellowship. I think each of their practices are so incredibly strong. I'm a huge fan of all of their work. That's also the other thing. I'm like, you don't have a choice as to who you're showing for the artist in residence exhibition. And I feel like I had a genuine connection with every single one of the artist practices, and studio visits with each one of them was just dreamy, filled with really wonderful and difficult conversations and questions about the world that we're living in right now and what we want to see different, what we want to see changed, and how we are navigating taking care of ourselves while also fighting the good fight, Yeah, uncommon proximity, the title really came from just all different ideas of proximity, right? So our closeness to one another, our distance from the outside world, our distance from New York City, where technically we were supposed to be very close to New York City and continuing to work, and the closeness and distance between the themes within everyone's studio practices, something that I saw really early on, was all a part of that decision in terms of coming up with that title.
So I want to send everyone to this exhibition, right? So I have 2 questions. What's the address? Because I know it's in, I don't know, Lower East Side, Chinatown, around there. Tribeca. Okay.
Yeah.
So it's in Tribeca. And also, if you could walk us through the exhibition and maybe some highlights. Like, if you were to suggest someone to visit the show and be like, these are the works you need to like spend time with. Like, don't just pass by it. Like, what are some works in the show that you think people should really spend time with and just take in? And if you could tell us like where they are in the gallery.
Right. So the exhibition's up at James Cohan Gallery. James Cohan has 2 locations. So we're at the 48 Walker Street location. The exhibition is up until August 13th. The work, it's tough, because not only are all the pieces incredible, but these are works by my friends, When you walk in on the left-hand side, before you even step into the galleries, we have the portraits of each of the fellows that Vincent Valdez had drawn, pencil and paper. And it just feels like a really perfect way to start the exhibition, to be able to make eye contact basically with each of the fellows that have, offered their breath and offered their work into the space that you're about to enter. And I think that there is a certain kind of, life dignity that Vincent is able to include in each of those drawings. It feels very like there's a part of us in the drawings of ourselves. And so that feels especially special to start those off with. And as you walk in, there's 2 spaces, the gallery spaces. There's a smaller one up front, and then inside there's a larger space. In the first gallery space, we have works by Alana Clark, Jeffrey Maris, Daniel T. Gator-Lomack, and Elisa Sikelianos-Carter. I really tried to, I kept thinking to myself throughout the entire curatorial process, I do not want this to look like an MFA show. I do not want this to look like, no hate to MFA shows. I go to MFA shows all the time. I love them. But there's a disassociation. There's like a disjunction between works when you go to those shows, because it's a culmination of a single person's practice next to another culmination of a single person's practice. And it's like, they are not having conversations because they have not had to, and that's not the point of an MFA show, right? But for me, it was really important that I am placing the works in a way where they are each having conversations with one another rather than showing Elisa's work and Jeffrey's work and Vincent's work. And luckily for me, I think that the artists were having conversations, whether they thought so or not. And I think that I could easily kind of place different ideas of healing, different roads to finding peace and retribution within everybody's practices next to one another. I think specifically in that first gallery, I'm very proud and happy and excited to see Alana's cocoa butter piece next to Jeffrey's Catch a Stick of Fire, this larger chandelier-like piece that hangs from the ceiling. Just in terms of, they both have this very quiet but powerful way of thinking about transcendence, about thinking of the ways in which we morph and change to attain a sense of higher self, like peace. And placing those two next to one another felt specifically powerful for me. When you walk into the second space, there's Daniel T. Gator Lomax's Keep Kickin' in the center on a round pedestal that really speaks to the 2020 election. It's a rocking chair found object with a bound metal claspings around, along with an official voter pen placed in the center. And there's something very unnerving about the way that the chair is bound, you know? And Daniel loves to, whenever he's in this space, he'll rock the chair and like show it with movement. And I think that there is this image that viewers can see of imagining a person in that chair, bound into the chair, and then relating that to the feelings of helplessness and confusion and the feeling of being bound truly in our voting system and in our government. And that metaphor felt really strong in terms of bringing this exhibition together because of the timing as to when all of the works were being made. Oh God, there's so many good works. And then in the back wall under the skylights, we have Esteban Ramon Perez's large leather painting in red. It's titled Como la Flor, after Selena's wonderful song. Esteban is just the technical just rigor that is necessary for a lot of these works. I think specifically for Esteban's work is just mind-blowing. This piece is about 10 feet by 10 feet, hangs off of multiple steer horns, and is made of leather scraps sewed together. And then on one side, the leather side, he uses a tattooing method. So he uses a tattoo gun without the ink to etch an image that he distorts in Photoshop. So in Como la Flor, the image is of the Mexican coat of arms that's been distorted. So you can't really see that it's the Mexican coat of arms, but there is that image on there. And then on the back side, he uses a pinstriping method to tape off an image that's almost like a bullseye before, and then paints over it with this glittered paint before taking the tape off. And, you know, Esteban is really interested in incorporating his culture, his SoCal Chicano culture into the works that he creates. He also has the El Gallo Negro in the first gallery, which is a hanging piece made of black boxing gloves and pheasant and rooster feathers, along with ancho chiles, the dried chiles. And so I think what he does is bring these objects that he has really grown up with and images that are really that signify his relationship to culture and history and family, into these spaces of art, these like East Coast art spaces, right? There's a power and protection that kind of emanates from these objects in a way that is really, there's a vulnerability there that allows for these objects to offer that to viewers. I'll just mention, I think lastly, even though I wasn't able to mention everyone's works, Vincent Valdez has a painting in the large main gallery that sits on cinder blocks of a Chicano boxer sitting in the corner of a ring. And I think during installation, it's exhausting. It's tough. It was a really long week. I was moving and it was kind of later in the evening and I was the last person left in the gallery space. And I just made eye contact with this boxer, this exhausted boxer. And every time you look at this painting, there's a new detail that comes out. And that time I was looking at that painting, I saw this detail of this scar on the boxer's left shin bone. Very subtle, but it just felt like, I was talking to Vincent about it afterwards, and he was speaking about how there's so much history and pain in that one detail. And I got very emotional thinking about what the painting was talking about in terms of this person being caught between two worlds of wealth and poverty, of white America and Chicano heritage, and thinking about what I was doing in that space, how I'd come there, what that week was like, and all the work that needs to be done. It just felt like a good, perfect metaphor for a lot of us who live and work and strive in the US, right? Children of immigrants, refugees. There's this push and pull of being in between two places at once. Yeah, so I highly, highly recommend taking a look at that piece. It's on the left-hand side as you walk into the larger gallery.
I feel transported. I think you just transported everyone into the gallery in such a beautiful way. And I'm just so glad this interview is going to go out to everyone, because I'm glad that I asked that question, because I had so many things going on in my mind, but I can see the imagery, but I can also like feel your intention behind where you placed all the works and what was in conversation with what. And I could just feel and hear like the care that went into this. And I think, yeah, I just love how people are going to hear this and also see where your mind went and see where the process is, like what the process of curating is like. It's more than just putting things onto a wall, but it's also about like your connection with the artist, your connection with the works,
Right.
your relationships. It's all about relationships. It's not just about the objects themselves, but it's also about how you connect with the work, how you connect with the artist, how you connect with the space. It's all about defining these different meanings and mediums and all the things. It's like you're creating a realm of its own, and you're, leading all the viewers through the space. And just the care, period. Yeah, and I feel that, definitely feel that. And this actually, I'm glad that you kind of virtually walked us through the space, because I feel so much more prepared, I guess, going into the show. And like, hearing
Yeah.
your
And we'll
experiences.
go together. Obviously,
Yeah.
we get tour.
Yes. Definitely want to do a tour.
Yeah.
I'm 10 times more excited to like see the works now, because I feel like now I'm going to come from like, I guess, a more informed but also intentional space too.
Yeah.
So
Thank you.
yeah, I'm also so proud of you. Congratulations.
I'm proud of you every day.
So last question is, I guess, what is the future looking like? I know that you're preparing for BARD right now.
Yeah.
Just tell us a bit about any other projects you have coming up, other intentions you're setting for yourself, all the good things.
Yeah. I am no projects. I am trying my hardest, to like cut back on everything. I think it's time. It's been many handful of years, a couple of years of working kind of nonstop, right? On top of a full-time job, working a full-time fellowship, doing a million independent shows, running around like crazy, going to every single opening and seeing a million people all the time. And then pandemic wise, in ways that I thought that things would slow down, you thought things would slow down. That was not the case for me, fortunately and unfortunately, right? And so I think that I want to take my opportunity going to grad school, take this time to really focus in on reading and writing and connecting with the practice of taking care of myself, learning to take care of myself while also diving into the things that I love. And I think that stepping back and going over what I've worked on, what I've seen over the last few years is really important, and living in New York, you really don't have a lot of opportunity to step back and observe, to step back and reflect and give yourself the time to kind of, think about what you've done in terms of like, give yourself time to be proud of yourself, give yourself time to go to take a look at what you've worked on, and also give yourself time to offer yourself the criticisms that you need to be able to move forward, to be able to continue making good work, et cetera, et cetera. And so I want this next chapter of my life to be time to gather, my bowl, fill myself back up, and then to return. I don't know, no one knows, but currently my plan is to return back to New York City after grad school, hotter, stronger than ever.
Hotter, stronger, sexier than ever.
Yes, exactly. 2024, get ready. Yes. So I am hoping that it'll be a good time for that type of reflection and for connection,
Well, thank you so much, Claire. We had such a good time listening to you and your stories.
Thank you.
And all the wonderful things you are doing. Everyone, go see Uncommon Proximity right now. Get out your house, go to the exhibition.
Yes.
Enjoy the pieces. And please follow Claire on
Instagram.
Yeah.
Instagram. I'm at Medium Rare Claire.
Yes.
Yeah, like I said, Uncommon Proximity is up until mid-August, and I'll be doing a couple tours in July. So keep an eye out for those. And thank you, Kiara, for inviting me onto this space. You know that I say yes to anything and everything that you'd like to do because I trust you with my life.
Yes.
And we've got history.
Yes.
Baby. It's been a minute.
I know. More to come. So much more to come.
Yeah.
So thank you so much. Bye, y'all.
Bye.